Welcome to the Langara Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Hazel Love.
And I'm Oksana Shtohryn, a reporter for the Langara Voice.
Today, we're diving into something most of us take for granted, our groceries. More specifically, where do our fruits and veggies actually come from? This may be something you hadn't given much thought to before.
But with ongoing trade tensions between Canada and the US, there has been a bigger push to buy Canadian. But how realistic is that? How much do we rely on imports? And what would it take for Canada to become more self-sufficient?
That's where Canada Food Flows comes in. It's an interactive tool from UBC that maps where 34 of our most popular fruits and vegetables come from, both inside and outside of the country.
But beyond the data, do everyday shoppers actually care about where their food comes from? I hit the stores to talk to students and a local farmer to find out.
And to help us break it all down, I spoke with one of the creators of Canada Food Flows, Dr. Navin Ramankutty, to understand what this tool means for Canadian consumers and the bigger picture of food security. What was one of the fruit or veg that you were most surprised that we don't actually grow that much of?
I don't know if I was surprised by. Actually, the thing that surprised me most was that we actually seem to get some apples from China, and it kind of blows my mind. It's like we grow so many apples here in BC. It's like, why are we getting apples from China?
So Canada Food Flows is a little bit like Google Maps for dinner plates. It's described as. Can you break it down for us a little bit? How does it actually work, and how can people learn from it?
It maps at a provincial level where our food comes from, and we are focusing on just fruits and vegetables. When you bring up the tool, it first shows a globe and a whole bunch of lines, and you can choose a particular year. It has data for about a dozen years or so.
Yeah.
You can choose a year, and you can choose one of the multiple commodities, and then it'll show you lines that show where these flows are, and then you can click on a particular flow, and you can get a little bit more information on how many tons in which country and so on. A lot of our fruits and vegetables come from abroad. About 50% of our vegetables and nearly 3/4 of our fruit come from outside of Canada. Climate change impacts, say, Mexico, that affects our avocado supply. Climate change impacts California, where we get a ton of our produce from. That affects our supply.
It's come in at a time that could be instrumental for helping people when they're making decisions. There's a lot of controversy going around at the moment with the US tariffs coming in, and there's a big push to buy for more local produce. And how much do we rely on the US for fruits and veggies?
So about 36% of our fruits and 67% of our vegetables comes from the US. That's a huge dependency.
Kind of tying this in a little bit to our student listeners, why do you think they should care about where their food comes from?
As Canadians, we've gotten used over the past 50 to 100 years of just being dependent on the US and other trading partners and not worrying about it, and just going to the grocery store and being able to pick up whatever we want and putting it into our basket and walking away, right? And so this actually is like a moment to say that things we've been taking for granted for years and decades are actually not really guaranteed.
With all of this in mind, we wanted to hear what students think about buying local. Do they even consider where their food comes from? And would they be willing to pay more to support Canadian farmers?
At Langara College, I spoke with Karina Reed, a student who said she didn't always think about food origins, but lately that's changed.
Didn't necessarily before, but with the new Trump tariff trade war, yes. I have 2 kids, and we made this our kind of experiment to go through a grocery store and understand every label. There's a really huge Canadian pride aspect everywhere in the grocery store. So yeah, I really care now where everything is coming from, and I want it to be from Canada.
Still, she says price plays a big role in her grocery choices.
Price is definitely a factor. I mean, that's a hard one where if I'm looking at like fresh fruits and vegetables, I will most likely not choose that based on price, and I'll choose frozen, which ends up being cheaper and actually has a higher nutritional component.
For Reed, access for local food depends on where you live.
I live in Richmond, so we have lots of farms, and I can get to a farm, and I know that's not necessarily accessible for everyone, but yeah, I mean, price obviously is a big factor, but I think there's ways around it.
She also liked the idea of an app that could track food sources and make it easier for people to choose local.
I think that's power. I mean, we're in a place that you can feel very powerless on what's happening in the United States and affecting Canada, so I think it's a way for us to stand up for our country and unite as a country and put power in the consumer hands.
What about the farmers actually growing our food? If demand for local produce rises, can they keep up?
I went to Vancouver Farmers Market to speak with Robert Lewis from Eden Fresh Farms, who sells local produce. He's been noticing more customers prioritizing Canadian-grown food.
We're seeing an uptick in that all the time, especially in the last month or so. It just, the local thing is really popular right now. But with all the markets we do in Vancouver, it's a pretty dedicated crowd that comes out on a regular basis.
With more people thinking about food origins, I asked him whether farmers could keep up if demand for local produce keeps rising.
I think so. In the short term, yes. For things that would normally go to grocery stores, stuff like that, it's going to be a shift for sure. Farmers are producing a lot. A lot of times we have more than we're selling. For small farms, especially at the market, it's a big boost for us.
More interest in local food is a good thing for farmers like Lewis. However, although interest for local produce is rising, the real question is whether the shift in consumer behavior will last.
So, what's the takeaway here? Canada imports the majority of its fruits and veg, and that's not changing overnight. But tools like Canada Food Flows help us understand our food system better, and maybe even help us make more conscious choices. Next time you're in the grocery store, check those labels. Is your spinach from Canada or California? Would you pay a little extra to keep it local? And if you're curious, go play around with Canada Food Flows. It's a really cool way to visualize where your food is actually coming from. That's it for today's episode of the Langara Voice Podcast. Thanks to Dr. Ramankutty, the students, and Robert Lewis for sharing their thoughts.